Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and you have found us here, to my delight, at Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze, and we are so thrilled that you decided to join us today. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 15 going on 16 novels of suspense. My current novel, thank you, Abbott. My current novel is One Wrong Word, which is now out in gorgeous trade paperback in addition to the hardcover. And my new book is called All This Could Be Yours, and it will be out this time next year. And we'll talk about that in a while, because here we are today to celebrate the fabulous, brilliant Abbott Kahler and her narrative nonfiction, Eden Undone, which is, you all, it is unique. It is chilling. It is shocking. Look what it says on the cover: a true story of sex, murder, and utopia at the dawn of World War II. I mean, you can't really do better than that. You have never, I promise you, never read anything like this, and it is absolutely haunting. Before I introduce Abbott a little bit, let me say hi to Renee and Deborah. Avalon Gray says, the best time of the week. Robin Stull is here. Katie Crutchfield says, hi, ladies. I love Tuesday, and we love you. It is marvelous to see you all. Thank you. I'm doing YouTube, says Randy Gravitz. Okay, we're on YouTube too. And perhaps on Facebook, we start at 4 on the dot. So if you arrive early, Facebook is the place to be to make sure that you don't miss this. And here is Susie Baldwin from Seattle. You know Susie, right, Ava?
I think I do, yeah.
She's amazing. Anyway, let me tell you what Susan Orlean, no less, said about Eden Undone. A wild ride through an extraordinary true story, Eden Undone is addictive and astonishing. It combines a forgotten piece of history with the urgency of a murder mystery in the most unlikely setting. And Susan Orlean says, it will captivate you. So at some point, Abbott, that came through on your email. What did you think?
I mean, Susan Orlean is a literary hero of mine. She's absolutely brilliant. And to have such a nice and generous endorsement from her, I mean, it's one of the best feelings you can get. I feel, in this business with so many ups and downs that we writers experience, you have to celebrate everything. And I certainly was feeling celebratory after that blurb came in. It was very kind of her.
Well, it was kind of her, and that she's just not going to dash off a blurb, that she really read it and she really loved it. I mean, addictive and astonishing. I agree with that. And digging up this story must have been addictive and astonishing for you. But I'm not going to ask you that now. I'm going to ask you that in 2 minutes, because what I want to do is tell you all, welcome, welcome, welcome to A Mighty Blaze. If you haven't been here before, yay, this is a perfect day to come, because we are talking about Eden Undone, a true story of sex, murder, and utopia at the dawn of World War II. You came to the right place, you all, by the fabulous Abbott Kahler. A Mighty Blaze was founded at the beginning of the pandemic, going on 5 years ago, by the genius powerhouse duet of Caroline Levitt and Jenna Blum. And to keep us together, it was designed to keep our writing and reading community together, to discover new books and hear about new authors, meet favorite authors, and maybe meet a couple of new favorite authors. So whether you know Abbott Kahler already from her past books, or whether she is new to you, today is the day to be here. Let me tell you a little bit about Abbott Kahler, and then I will finally let her talk. But I want you to know who she is. Abbott Kahler is the author of 4 New York Times bestselling works of narrative nonfiction. Her debut novel, Where You End, was inspired by a true story of identical twins and amnesia. If you did not read Where You End, go run and get it. Not right now. After. USA Today once named her a pioneer of sizzle history, and we'll ask her what sizzle history means, but it's kind of self-explanatory, right? Her newest book, nonfiction, is Eden Undone. Abbott's books have been featured as Indie Next Picks, Amazon Best Picks of the Year, Library Journal's Best Picks of the Year, and Smithsonian Magazine's Best History Books of the Year. She has also been a finalist for the Edgar Award for Best Fact Crime, and the Goodreads Book Award for History, and the Ohioana Book Awards, the second oldest literary prize in the country. Her books have been optioned for television and film, and she is a native of Philadelphia, where she spent 6 years as a journalist covering crime advocating for abused women, and hanging out with mafia wives and baseball wives, mafia bosses and baseball wives. Maybe mafia boss and mafia wives are the same. We'll just get to that later. She lives in New York City and in Greenport, New York, where she's convinced her little bungalow is haunted. that is so great. And my last thing, and then Abbott gets to talk. Abbott is giving away a copy of Eden Undone. Not this one. I am keeping this, but she's giving away a copy of Eden Undone. So leave a question or a comment in the chat, and we'll spin the wheel of fun at the end of the show. And one of you lucky listeners will get a copy of Eden Undone. Finally to you, Abbott. I feel like I'm at the beginning of this doing the housekeeping. I always feel like I'm talking.
I could listen to you talk for an hour, Hank. So
Yeah. Abbott still has her Philly accent, says Renee. It sounds like she is a pal. Sue Street says she's a new author to me. And London says, loved her other books. And Emily says, wonderful bio. So that is great. Anyway, tell us about the book.
Well, okay, I'll tell you about the book, and then maybe we could get into how I found the story, which is always fun. But, it is the Stranger Than Fiction true story of a group of European exiles who tried to find utopia on a remote, uninhabited Galapagos island. And as you might expect, it goes terribly awry. It turns into kind of an adult Lord of the Flies. When I was writing it, to me, it felt a lot like a real life And Then There Were None, the Agatha Christie murder mystery that takes place on an island. And it was kind of a writing a nonfiction whodunit, and set in this really exotic locale with people that I couldn't believe were real. I think that if I had gone to my editor and said, I want to write a novel about these people who showed up on this Galapagos island and just everybody starts dying and disappearing, my editor would have been like, I think you need to scale that back a little bit. I think it's not believable. But so really, in this case, the truth is stranger than fiction.
Well, I want to talk about every single one of those things you mentioned, the Galapagos and utopia and murder and Agatha Christie and the characters. But let's get in from the beginning. How did you discover this story?
Well, it's been a long time in the making, this story. So I think it was about 12 years ago. I was perusing newspaperarchives.com as writers do. And I came upon a tabloid headline that was so unbelievable. Like, I had to read it a couple times just to make sure I was actually reading what I thought I was reading. And if you will indulge me, I'll read this headline so everybody can just see what I saw in this story. Quote, was Dr. Ritter with his steel teeth poisoned in paradise? Was Baroness Eloise, known as Crazy Panties, who ruled the island with a gun and love, murdered by one of her love slaves after she had driven the other to his death? And why is Frau Ritter going back to what she once called Hell's volcano, the mystery of the Galapagos island which Germany covets, to be solved at last? So I immediately forgot all about the story I was researching and pivoted. I said, I have to write this book. I have to write this book. I went to my publisher and they said, no, you write American history. You write American characters. That's what we want from you. So years passed, I wrote other books, but my heart and mind, remained with this crazy story. And I finally took the publisher of Penguin Random House, the Crown division that I'm with, out for drinks right before the pandemic and said, please, 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 please. And I made the argument that, this isn't a European story or an American story. This is a human story. Who among us hasn't thought about, abandoning our lives and going for something simpler, just running away from it all and starting over on a remote island? I feel it's something that everybody could really relate to. And he finally got that argument and let me do the book.
It is quite amazing and completely immersive. How did you go about researching this? I mean, the research in this novel, in this book, in this narrative nonfiction, the research is absolutely impeccable. And you say in the author's note that everything is real. And you'll hear, Abbott, if we hear a funny sound in the background, can you just tell us what that is?
Oh, yes. I have an African gray parrot who likes to beep and imitate the noises of my Manhattan neighborhood. So if you hear any garbage trucks going back and forth, it's my parrot.
It's your parrot. Okay, now we know. So we were talking about narrative nonfiction. How do you do that? How do you make a story out of something that's already a story? I mean, I know I read your author's note saying everything is authentic. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'm probably to my detriment sometimes. I'm very selective about what stories I want to do for a full length book.
Mhm.
Number one, they have to have the capacity to read like fiction. I want my narrative nonfiction to have a beginning, a middle, end with stakes rising and tension and conflict and an interesting resolution. And to have those things and to keep it nonfiction, you have to have the source material. And I was very lucky with this story that there was a lot of primary source material. Two of my main characters, Dory Strach and Margaret Whitmer, both very interesting women, both had memoirs. The challenge there, though, was that their memoirs had very conflicting accounts about, what eventually happened with the disappearances and things like that. There were also a bunch of letters and archives, especially in the Smithsonian in Washington and in the USC out in Los Angeles. And there was an American explorer there who had befriended all of the European exiles. And they began sending him letters saying, "You're not going to believe what's going on here. We need your help. It's getting crazier and crazier." And all of that was in his archives. So I really had a lot of the material I needed to make this a whodunit. I really wanted it to be a whodunit.
Well, one of the great lines in your novel is like, forgive me if I say this, in your book, if we're talking about the narrative nonfiction, Eden Undone by Abbott Kahler. One of the characters says, everything is exaggerated by people who don't know. How do you balance what's real? I mean, what you were saying that the diaries were different. How do you know what's real? And how do you balance sort of drama and exaggeration and the need to keep an audience reading with your caring touch as a researcher and a writer?
It's a very good question. And it was a challenge. I will say up front that I think that what people choose to lie about or what they choose to omit is just as important and relevant as what they do tell the truth about. There's always reasons for lying. There's always reasons for omissions. And what are those reasons and how do they factor into the true story? And so I spent a lot of time going. Is
that your bird being the phone?
That's actually my buzzer for my apartment, but
you need to go get it.
I'm just going to stop it. Hold on. Sorry.
It's fine. When I was growing up, we had a minor bird. I hate to tell you this. We had a minor bird. We had a minor bird when I was growing up, Abbott, named Yurza the myna, which was ridiculous. And it learned to imitate the telephone. And our phone would ring all the time, and it was the bird. And that was so annoying. So that's why I wondered if your bird was talking about that. So, and anyway, we will wait for Abbott to come back.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Sometimes it doesn't work. I live in a very old Victorian brownstone, tiny apartment, and that was my bird, the beep.
Anyway, you never know what's going to happen here on Crime Time, you all. It's never a dull moment. Anyway, pick up your thought what we were talking about.
Yeah, so I'm grappling with these two memoirs. I'm trying to figure out, both of them were lying at different points. So I basically had to compare their memoirs with various accounts of other objective participants in the story, and see who was telling the truth where. And also sometimes I would present their two different versions, and I'm not quite sure what was the truth, but I say, here are two different versions. I kind of intimate in my authorial voice that I believe this one over the other one and why, but I really want readers to also, part of my hope for this book is that people will get to the end and be like, let's talk about what happened. What are your theories? What are your theories?
Well, let's go back to the beginning again, because you say, let's talk about what happened. So let's talk about what happened. Okay. How did this all begin? And how did it evolve?
So it begins in Berlin, Germany, with this very eccentric doctor named Frederick Ritter. He is working at a hospital in Berlin, and he has these very sort of, you could even say, modern ideas about health and medicine, raw food, the sort of idea that we should not be eating anything processed and meat isn't good for you. And he's working in this hospital. He is probably, not surprisingly, an obsessive of Nietzsche. And he meets this woman named Dory Strach, who is his patient, and she's suffering from multiple sclerosis. And all of the other doctors had told Dory that her condition was incurable, but not Frederick. Frederick says, you want to be sick. You're choosing to be sick. You can heal yourself through the power of your mind, and instead of, like bashing him over the head, like I think anyone would do, she was like, wow, that's fascinating. So they decide to leave their spouses, and go together to the Galapagos island of Floriana. Frederick had long decided he wanted to flee civilization. He thought civilization didn't have anything to offer. And he had this sort of Nietzschean dream of moving to a dark island where he could write his philosophy and spread his work around the world. And Dory decided it was her role in life to assist him in this. And I remember one really chilling line in her memoir. It says, "I think I am the only woman he truly didn't despise."
Oh.
And I thought, wow, that's such a ringing endorsement for your for your relationship. But they move down to Floriana. They start, trying to make a life there. It's completely uninhabited. It's very wild terrain. There's only one fresh water source. It's not easy to grow anything. It's very difficult living, especially if you have multiple sclerosis, I would think. And they sort of settle into an uneasy peace. They'll have bright moments, but then moments when the tension between them really starts growing and becoming more apparent.
So they're there by themselves initially.
Yes, they're there by
What
themselves.
happens?
So they're there by themselves. They're struggling a little bit. And in January of 1930, so this is right after the stock market crashed, Adolf Hitler is rising to power. Just to give you a little historical context, an American explorer named Eugene MacDonald shows up on Floriana. He was a very wealthy man. He was the founder of Zenith Radio. And it became this sort of interesting pastime for wealthy American men, while everybody else is suffering from the Depression. They all chartered yachts and had yachts built and did some oceanic exploration down in the South Pacific. It was kind of the new thing to do. So he goes there. He completely expects Floriana to be uninhabited. He has no idea anybody's living there. He goes there to find, exotic flora and fauna. And what does he find but Frederick and Dory? And, they're naked, toiling on their farm. And he's like, who are these people? So they talk, and MacDonald gives them some food and everything. And he comments on Frederick's steel teeth. I just want to take a moment to talk about Frederick's steel teeth. Frederick Ritter, one of his ideas was that he wanted to test to see if gums could become horny enough to substitute for teeth. And he also was afraid of dental problems on an island. So before he left Germany, he extracted all of his teeth and had them replaced by a set of steel dentures. But he didn't account for the eventual shrinkage of his gums, and the teeth wouldn't stay in. So Frederick was kind of a terrifying sight. MacDonald was like, who is this man with the steel dentures? He gives some gifts to them, and he goes back to America and reports on this encounter. And he says, I found this modern day Adam and Eve living on this remote island in the Galapagos. And what happens, of course, this headline spreads around the world, and other people decide that they want to see what this is all about for themselves.
And so I'm just in awe of this story. I mean, I can see how your imaginary editor would say, this is impossible. This never could have happened. And you're making my mouth hurt. I have to tell you, that is just one of the incredibly chilling, haunting moments in this book. We're talking about Eden Undone, the narrative nonfiction by the fabulous Abbott Kahler. And you can tell this is just the beginning of the story, you all. So this sort of modern day naked Adam and Eve on the Galapagos, on Floriana, gets publicity. And then what happened?
So at that point, the newspaper headlines even reached Germany, and another family decides to move to the Galapagos Island. And this family is Heinz Whitmer, his lover, Margaret, Heinz's young son from his first marriage. And Margaret is going to be pregnant shortly. By the time they get to Floriana, she's 5 months pregnant. So they moved to Floriana. And I think at first they thought, we'll have two fellow countrymen there. We'll at least have some friends. And one of their motivations for moving was that, number one, Heinz was a high-ranking official in the Weimar Republic. And of course, Adolf Hitler coming to power, he wanted to get out of that situation. And the other one was that his son, Harry, had been sickly since birth. And they thought that the tropical climate and heat might do him some good. So they show up there, and Margaret's 5 months pregnant. They go to pay their respects to the famous Dr. Ritter and Dory. And Dr. Ritter, Frederick, is very angry about this. He did not come to the Galapagos Islands to deliver any babies, to administer medical care. He came there to be in peace and solitude, or so he says, and write his philosophies. So they get off to a really bad start. And Dory had been hopeful that she would get along with Margaret and maybe have a female friend there. But she called Margaret. She's like, why? She called her an idiot. What is this idiot doing giving birth in a remote location like this? And Margaret is like, what is this idiot doing quoting Nietzsche? Why do you have these pretensions of quoting philosophy on this island? What good is that doing you? So they really didn't see eye to eye. And they did settle into kind of an uneasy peace. And they would remain that way until, of course, the next people showed up.
Da, da. And so, this is not any of a spoiler, you all. This is all at the beginning of the book. We are not telling you anything that you won't know right away, or that isn't on the back cover and the promo for it. Mary cared to tell Malcolm. Yeah,
absolutely.
We're not even going any further into the teeth. Yes, Randy says, I just attended a horror book talk. This is a mystery, but seems to have a hint of horror, which is interesting because Hampton Sides, I want to read you this marvelous blurb from Hampton Sides, says, in describing Abbott Kahler's wickedly gothic tale, one is tempted to reach for handy literary or cinematic references. There's a dash of Conrad, a bit of Hitchcock, notes of Melville, Darwin, and Robinson Crusoe, and certainly more than a whiff of Lord of the Flies. Isn't that so perfect? What did you think when you saw that?
No, I mean, I think that might be the best blurb I've ever received in my life. And coming from Hampton Sides, who's so brilliant in this genre and narrative nonfiction. I mean, really, it was such another day to celebrate, another little moment that you have to celebrate. It was wonderful of him.
So taking each of those elements, though, the Lord of the Flies element rings so especially true. I mean, all of them do, but especially true to me, because when you take people and put them together in this pressure cooker of a situation, and hence the Agatha Christie reference as well, something is going to happen. It's going to boil over. And it says on the cover, a true story of sex, murder, and utopia. Can you talk a little bit about the utopia element?
Yeah, I think that all of these people came to Floriana with an idea of creating a utopia. And of course, the problem arises when utopia, the word is subjective, the concept is subjective, and all of these people have different ideas of what utopia looks like. So when their competing visions just started clashing, I mean, that's when utopia turns into Lord of the Flies. It just was inevitable. What's the phrase? Wherever you go, there you are. And to quote William Golding in Lord of the Flies, maybe there is a beast, maybe it's only us. And of course, utopia is also impossible because human beings are fallible. Imperfect people can't create a perfect society.
And it's so interesting. I agree with you completely that when you say utopia, everybody has a different idea of what that might be and also what they wish it would be. Yeah. And also it's very difficult for human beings to do something that has no hierarchy, that has no power structure. But we always fall into some sort of a power structure. The thing that makes this even more gorgeously, exotically Gothic is the cast of characters that are together on this island. Did you, when you turn the pages of your research and put these pictures in your head, London says, wow, this sounds great. Yes. Talk a little bit about the population then that wound up in Floriana in this pseudo utopia.
So we have Dory and Frederick. Then we have Margaret, Hines, Harry, the young son, and the baby Rolf, who was eventually born. By the way, with Dr. Ritter's begrudging help. He finally, acquiesces. So I guess Ritter wasn't a bad guy all of the time. But next came a woman called the Baroness, Crazy Panties, the aforementioned Crazy Panties from the headline I read earlier. And she shows up with two male lovers. And the Baroness was just a fascinating character. I think she was born just for me to write about her. She's my quintessential female character from history, though I love. And she's originally from Vienna, but when the story begins, she's in Paris. And if you've heard anything about this story ever over the years, she's always called a self-proclaimed baroness, a so-called baroness. This woman was actually a legitimate baroness. Her grandfather earned the title through his bravery during the Austro-Prussian War. She spoke 8 languages. She was from the same dynasty as, or the same, her ancestors were from the same dynasty as Prince William and Harry, that sort of, and so she did have a little bit of a aristocratic background. And so she's in Paris. She hears about Dr. Ritter. She hears about the Whitmers. And she says that she hears God's voice telling her that she has to go to Floriana and take it over. Like God is telling her to go there and conquer this island and make it her own. So this is in her own words. So she shows up with 2 of her male lovers. By the way, she was married to a French war hero. She left him behind. And she shows up. And the first thing that she does is go to meet Heinz and Margaret and dips her feet in their drinking water. Then she sets up camp nearby and announces that she wants to turn Floriana into Miami. She's going to build a Miami-style resort called the Hacienda Paradiso, and it's going to attract American tourists. And that's what her utopia looks like.
So terrifying. And she was had some interesting ideas of fun.
I will say this. She was a libertine. She was a wild woman. I kind of admired her in the sense that she was brazen and she went after whatever she wanted to go after and did not care, did not GAF. And so she does build this hotel. And she starts seducing American tourists. Of course, the American tourists start showing up. One of her tourist friends called it a, quote, festering sex complex. So just to give you an idea, and of course, poor Margaret and Heinz are living right down the road with their brand new baby, and all kinds of sounds and activity is going on at all hours of the night. And, Heinz and Frederick are so disturbed by this woman that they actually try to band together and get help. They don't know what she's up to, what she's capable of, and they're afraid of her.
The whole scene, the whole setting is unbelievable, and the characters are incredible. We know it's a true story of sex, murder, and utopia. We will not get into the murder part because even what we've told you is just the bare minimum of this incredible story. Now, I want to show you one thing, though, and that is when you read this novel, this book, and I know you will, this much is the reference material. This much of it is the footnotes and the annotations and the indication of where every single thing came from. Abbott, your mind, I do not know how it works. And I embrace every brain cell of it. Can you tell us a little bit about that, the research and the meticulous way that you put this together, and why, how you feel when you look at this sort of proof?
I feel cross-eyed when I look at that because it was, I should mention, I had to rush this book out. My original pub date was May of 2025. And as soon as I had finished my novel, I just got back from touring for my novel, and I got word that Ron Howard, the famous director Ron Howard, is coming out with a movie called Eden, starring Jude Law, Sydney Sweeney, Ana de Armas, and Vanessa Kirby. And my publisher said, chop, chop, we need to get this book out by the end of the year. So I lost 8 months of time and had to really quickly finish up my draft, edit again, 3 rounds of copy edits, and compile, 70 pages of endnotes. And Ron Howard's movie premiered at the Toronto Film Festival. I don't know when it will have its theatrical release, but my hope is that people will read the true story before seeing his fictionalized version.
Well, we're all, the movie in your mind when you read this book, the movie in your mind, the reader's mind begins to unspool instantly. We can completely picture this. And I mean, however you feel about that movie and however it turns out to be, it's a completely different entity than reading this incredibly well-researched and proven to be true narrative nonfiction. But let's go back to all of your references. How do you keep track? Julie says, so amazing your turnaround. Yes, everybody.
Thank you. I think I've been running on like booze and adrenaline for the last 8 months just to get this book out. But research is my favorite part of the process. I just revel in it. If I could still be researching this book for another 3 years, I would have done it. I just would have stayed in this world for as long as I could. And I'm a huge outliner. My outline for this book was about 130,000 words. The book itself is only about 85,000 words. So no worries. You're not getting like War and Peace. It's 85,000 words. But my outline, I basically write an outline and then I carve the book from that. And it's so important for me to write outlines because I think that helps nonfiction writers to use the elements of fiction. Oh, here's where I can do some foreshadowing. Here's when I can do a cliffhanger. Here's where I can build some suspense. So it just really helps you see what all the material is and how you might be able to place it in order to make the work read like fiction.
That is such a wise observation, because there is a rhythm of a book, of a novel. There's sort of a music of the architecture of a novel, and readers know what to expect. And what they hope for to be on a narrative ride.
Yeah.
But it's interesting too that I'm just thinking about this, that history, this is not profound, but history is a story. And what you've done is taken a slice of life, of real life, and told us this story. I know you had to rush like mad to do it, but when you finished, how did it change you, and how do you want readers to feel when they read this?
Well, I have to be honest, and I don't know if you feel this way, Hank, but whenever I finish a book, I go into a bit of a postpartum depression situation. I've wanted to write this book for 12 years, and to finally have done it and to lost 8 months with it. I was so looking forward to spending so much time with these characters. So it's a little, I'm glad it's out in the world. I'm glad people are enjoying it if they're enjoying it. But to me, it's a little melancholy. And so I think that writers often feel, they start missing the characters, especially with this, it's writing is such a solitary business, obviously. And, sometimes I'd go entire days not speaking to anybody but these dead people in my head.
That's all fine. It's all, we're sitting here like, yeah, okay, that's good. With you. I mean, it is. You are such a perfectionist, and that is proven by these end notes that you want everything to be absolutely perfect. But you're not going to let a book go unless it is. Can I just ask? Back to the process point. How do you keep track of it, though? I mean, you the sources in your head and what came from where, and how do you make sure that how can you retrieve things? How can you look up things? How do you know where things? Do you have your special Abbott Kahler system?
Well, I use Scrivener I think I highly recommend any writers out there. Scrivener is an excellent way to organize your material. And so it allows me to have a file on every single character, and then I can divide that file by year. So, here's Frederick Ritter, 1931, 1932, 1930, and you can search it. So that's very helpful, but I always have to outline and draft in Word. So whatever research I'm compiling in Scrivener, it ends up going over to Word. But that's really the two things. And I used to do everything on paper, but I live in a 600 square foot apartment in New York City, and my papers were getting unwieldy, and I couldn't find anything. So I've had to resort to being solely electronic.
I have two more questions for you, and I know we're a little bit out of time, but I have two more questions for you. Then we want you to ask questions. So put your questions in the chat or your comments in the chat, but questions for Abbott in the chat. And don't forget, one lucky crime timer will win a copy of Eden Unknown from Abbott Kahler. So put your questions in the chat, and then we'll spin the wheel of fun. But so going back to what you were talking about your research, though, I mean, you have to love it. I mean, it's just... This book is such a gem, and you've recreated history, if that's possible, in such a cinematic way. Are you happy though that you got a brain that can do this? Is that a weird question?
No, it's not a weird question at all. I mean, what I am very happy about is that I've been able to be published, and that I've been able to make a career out of writing, because I know so many hugely talented writers that just haven't had the luck.
Mm.
I think it's easy to forget that, sure, you have to sit your butt in the chair and write. You have to have some dedication and some craft. But it's also a lot of luck in this business. You have to hit the right agent at the right day. You have to hit the right editor on the right day. The editor has to go to the marketing people on the right day. The gods all have to align. And so I'm always thankful that I did have a little bit of a luck to boost me, along with, sitting my butt in the chair and all of that. So,
well, every good author embraces luck. There's just no question about it. Luck and timing play such a great role, but luck and timing don't matter as much if you don't have the book to back it up. I can't help but ask you. So the editor that you had to convince, what did they finally say when you came up with this gem?
The public, he came to me, I went into Crown last week to have a little celebration day on my pub day, and he said, you were right. So that's always, of course, very gratifying to hear. And I think it's a story that people, no matter what your background or where you live, people are going to relate to. Maybe not crazy panties. You won't relate to crazy panties, but you can relate to maybe the dreams that she had, I would think.
And speaking of names, someone might bat an eye at Abbott Kahler on the cover of this nonfiction novel and think, I'm not sure I've heard of her. Tell a little bit about why you're Abbott Kahler on this cover.
So I don't know if anybody's read any of my previous books, but I was publishing under the name Karen Abbott. And about 2013, so quite a while ago, a reader wrote to me and said, do you know if you Google yourself, it said you died in 2010? So sure enough, I Googled myself, a picture pops up with the words died 2010. And it was really super creepy. I was like, oh, if I've been like weekend at Bernieing for the last few years, what's going on here? So at that time, I had been working on fiction, and I thought, well, it'll be smart to change my name for my fiction. And I also was about to turn 40. So I was ripe for a midlife crisis. So I'm like, I'm just going to go change my name. So I went to the New York courthouse. I formally changed my name to Abbott Kahler. And decided recently to just start using it exclusively for my work. So my novel is under Abbott Kahler, and now Eden Undone is my very first nonfiction under Abbott Kahler. But I still answer to Karen Abbott. My other books are still under Karen Abbott. So, it's all good there.
Why was there an obituary for you?
I wish I knew. It wasn't even an obituary. It just says died 2010. I have no idea how that happened. I enlisted a whole army of friends to write to Google, report the incorrect information, and they took it down, but I have a screenshot of it. And it was just super creepy.
Yeah. And the dominoes that fell in your life as a result of that, you are now the fantastic Abbott Kahler with this brilliant, brilliant book. Congratulations on Eden Undone. Let's take some questions from the audience. I know there are questions. Sharon Bishop says, of course you were right. And Robin says, you were right. Yes, my 3 favorite words. What were the most challenging part of writing Eden Undone?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think that it was dealing with all the very conflicting narratives. And it's a challenge I expected because it is a murder mystery. So of course people are going to be lying, but I really had to be careful and trying to decide who was lying when and who I believed. And I spent a lot of time trying to find original sources that would talk about these characters and maybe who had some inside information that hadn't been reported anywhere else. And luckily for me, there was a brand new archive donated to the University of Southern California in 2020. Nobody had ever accessed it before. It was from a man named Lorenzo Di Stefano, who had been a screenwriter in the 1970s, hoping to write a screenplay about this. And he donated all of his interviews and all of his information. And it contained a lot of interviews with some of the American explorers who were very elderly by the 1970s. But he got some of the last interviews they gave, and they were so valuable and insightful and informative as I wrote the book.
And they were never published before, these archives.
No, so I have some brand new information in here. Yeah.
So talk about exploring, that's uncharted territory that you got to look at.
Yeah, and also pictures. There's pictures, there's video. There's a couple pictures in the book that haven't been published anywhere, including one very, I say, incriminating photo of the Baroness and Frederick Ritter. So,
Get the book to see it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I have the advanced copy that doesn't have
Oh
photos.
yeah, it doesn't have any photos. But I will say that Margaret Whitmer made a comment that the Baroness invited both Frederick and Heinz to visit her wigwam. And I'm guessing that either one or both of them did take her up on that offer.
That whole sentence is just really creepy. I have to say, so we just won't discuss it. Who else? It's a family show. Who else has a question? So then Julie Brinkley says, what is your go-to elixir when you write? You were talking about, what did you say? Alcohol and adrenaline. What about when you relax?
Oh, let's see. God, what do I do to relax? I hang out with my bird. I like a good wine. I like fun, fancy cocktails. I like, God, I have a couple TV shows that I use just to strictly shut my brain off. I think everybody needs a show where like there's no thought involved. There's just either pretty people on the screen and you just let your brain die. So I have a few shows like that. I just finished. I'm actually watching My Brilliant Friend right now, which is not an easy show, but it's takes me to an entirely different world and a fascinating one. So, and of course, books. I escape books, of course.
You watched Call My Agent?
I love Call My Agent. Yes, I loved Call My Agent. I was so sad. I was so sad when that ended. Yeah.
Really good though. That little sidebar note for Call My Agent. Okay, we'll take one more question. All right. Who has a question? Was this always the title? Oh, I remember when we talked about it, Abbott. Talk about that.
Very good question. And no, it was not. The original title was Then Came the Devil, which I love. I love that title. But the publishing marketing pros at Random House decided that we had to try to at least sound like Ron Howard's movie a little bit, just, to try to get that connection. So his movie is called Eden, and my book is Eden Undone.
Which is great. Fantastic.
The title was always the same.
I remember talking with you about title as you were trying to decide. Titling a book can be hard, and then the marketing people come and say, here's what it is, sister. And they were right. Eden Undone is good, although I love your title as well. We have run out of time, you all, and we are so thrilled that you have all been here today. Let's, your questions now, let's just spin the wheel of fun and see who's going to win a copy of Eden Undone. Someday we'll get music for this, you all. Someday we will. And the winner is Randy William Gravitz. That's so fantastic. Randy is connected with Barnes and Noble, so he is a wonderful person to have your book and a stalwart viewer here on Crime Time. So you know how it works, Randy. You'll get an email to email me. I'll email the executive producer. The executive producer will email Abbott's publicist, and then you will get your book.
And Randy, I'm going to throw in a steel denture bookmark. It is a bookmark with a little steel tooth on it, just to make sure you keep the spirit of Frederick Ritter alive as you read the book.
And the marvelously generous Randy has suggested that we let Katie, one of his reading partners, be the winner, because I think Randy has won in the past. So that's nice. So Katie Wasland, we will send you a copy of Eden Undone, and Randy, our undying gratitude for your gallantry to your reader friends. That is quite adorable. Abbott, speaking of quite adorable, congratulations on this. It's my bookmark is falling out. It is really a tour de force and quite amazing.
I can't thank you enough, Hank. It's such a pleasure always to talk with you, and I'm such a fan of your work, and I really can't wait for your next one too.
Thank you. That is so kind of you. I will take you up on that. And you all, we are so pleased that you have joined us here today. Before I let you go, let me show you who will be here next week, and you will not be able to resist this. Look at this, The Secret War of Julia Child. Oh my goodness, the title says it all, by Diana Chambers, The Secret War of Julia Child, which is, it says on the cover, an impeccably researched roller coaster ride by Susan Elia McNeil. And you know who Susan Elia McNeil is. She is a terrific writer who wrote the book series about Mr. Churchill's secretary, and has a whole series of marvelous historical fiction. And she is giving her stamp of approval to The Secret War of Julia Child by Diana R. Chambers, and she will be here next week. Diane says, thank you both. I am off the book, and she means Eden Undone. Congratulations again to you. Abbott?
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining today. Spread the word if you can. If you like the book, please leave a review. And thank you for reading. I mean, obviously, neither Hank nor I would be happy at all if without readers. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Wisely said. Absolutely so. And you know that a good review is one of the best gifts you can ever give a writer. So never hold back about giving a good review. I know all of you crime timers know that, but we can't say it enough. So until next week, you know what I'm going to say. It's always safe inside a book. And we will see you next